Welcome to Get Over It, the consciousness transforming podcast for exceptional 21st century living. Folks, we have a show today on dignity, Alzheimer's, forgetting who you are and possibly the other people around you. Stephen G. Post is with us, and he's going to talk about his new book, Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People, How Caregivers Can Meet the Challenges of Alzheimer's Disease. And, we all know someone who either has Alzheimer's, had Alzheimer's, or you can see them on their way to possibly be getting to coming down with Alzheimer's. And, it's a nasty, nasty condition. It truly is because it takes the person away from us. And more importantly, it takes us away from the person. But we're going to talk today on how to help deeply forgetful people. And that's Stephen's phrase for Alzheimer's. And it's deeply uh, forgetful people. Now, the information shared on Get Over It uses intuitive and pragmatic insight to help you shift your consciousness to break through blocks and release energy that is no longer needed. Yes, we're going to help you let go of the BS that's holding you back, but you guys know I always ask that question, are you truly ready to? And by the way, folks, BS is belief system. A bit about me for my new listeners, intuitive since birth. I'm a third generation intuitive with over 3 decades of experience supporting people to break through the blocks along their path. I'm a strategist for personal and professional transformation, revealing cutting edge information that enables you to prosper and thrive. I spent 25 years in corporate America as an executive sales professional, and I'm the founder of Healing Visions Ministries and the Northern California Children's Education Network, a 501c3 nonprofit. I provide consultations and healings in all areas of life that heal the mind body spirit connection, allowing you to live your very best life. My clients tell me that I keep it real while providing them with accurate information to assist them along their journey as a spirit living a human existence. But they also say, if you really don't want to know, don't ask Monique. My background includes a doctorate in metaphysics, a Reiki master teacher, ordained minister, and clinical hypnotherapist. So whether you're stressed, depressed, or possessed, I can help. To find out more about me and the services I offer, go to my website, and that's moniquechapman.com. And I invite you to like me on Facebook and LinkedIn. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe or give us some stars, whatever it is that you feel appropriate to do, because we would absolutely positively love it. My guest today, Stephen G. Post, Ph.D., is internationally renowned for his work with Alzheimer's patients, a disease which affects 4.5 million people in United States. He is the most widely quoted thinker about dignity and love for deeply forgetful people in the world and has addressed national conferences on all continents. His book, The Moral Challenge of Alzheimer's Disease, Ethical Issues from Diagnosing to Dying, was designated a medical classic of the century by the British Medical Journal, and that was back in 2009. Stephen began his work with Deeply Forgetful in the Cleveland area when he was a professor of religion and ethics. So he's come a long, long way. And he'll tell us his website because I don't have it here with me right now. Welcome back, Stephen.
Thank you, Monique. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, thanks. What's your website again? Make sure I have it.
Okay, it's Stephen with a PH, STEPHENG, post, POST.com.
Okay, so just like your name, Stephen G. Post, we found your website.
You
So,
got it.
yes, so first of all, welcome again. Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People. First, explain to us what deeply forgetful people, who are they?
Well, I love the words deeply forgetful people because they add dignity to these lives. I don't like the word dementia
Mm,
because that's a negative term. It simply refers to a decline from a former mental state. And very typically, people use it to distinguish them from us. and it fosters negative metaphors like husk, shell, and empty, and gone, and dead, and
Mm-hmm.
absent. Whereas deeply forgetful people, sure, people have various degrees of forgetfulness,
Mm-hmm.
but we all have our moments. There is a continuum. There's normal, so-called normal age-related forgetfulness. There is mild cognitive impairment. There is dementia. None of these things are very well defined as you get further along. But I like deeply forgetful people because, frankly, Monica, I've had my moments. I was out in the parking lot behind this medical school, Stony Brook, about a
Uh-huh.
year ago, and guess what? I had to ask a student if they knew where I parked my car. Well, that was okay. But then about a week later, I actually asked a student if they knew if I'd driven my car to work that day when they
Oh,
left.
okay. Now
So
that was a deeply forgetful moment.
that was a deeply forgetful moment. And Einstein would get lost in these moments of complete deep forgetfulness. He called them
Uh-huh.
Gedanken experiments, just thought experiments. He lost all
Uh-huh.
sense of time and place and identity. And he was very intuitive about this. And so it's not as though what they're experiencing is completely different than what we experience in lesser dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, but you said you forgot where your car was. I did an instance of forgetting where my car was, and I was standing right in front of it because I bought the family's second car. Okay, looking for the wrong car. But I can be in mid-sentence, just normal conversation, be in mid-sentence, and I can't find the word. Sometimes I can't find the word that describes something or an object. So is that, and I'm very close to 70, so is that the age-related forgetfulness, or is that just I'm kind of
Oh, well, it's
deeply,
hard to say, but
uh-huh,
um, we all are at times unable to grab hold of words, and it's quite
mm-hmm,
frustrating.
mm-hmm,
People who are further along in their forgetfulness, of course, this is more vexing and aggravating for them. But it's not as though their experience is completely alien to our own. So definitely, we should think of them as fully human. We should value them. We should connect with them because there are so many assets that they have. If we would just notice those
mm-hmm,
assets and figure
mm-hmm.
out how to connect beautifully with them, and there are incredible stories throughout this book about amazing encounters that were surprising to caregivers, but you have to be open to surprises and not write these people off as quote unquote demented.
Yeah, and that unfortunately is our society. I mean, once we reach a certain age in Western society, if first you're old, they start marketing everything to you to kind of remember. There's many different over-the-counter drugs, if you will, right now out there to help you remember who you are. And then younger people discard us. I mean, in other cultures, the older folks are sages and they're the wisdom keepers. In America, we're like, oh, they're just so put them out to pasture. But when they put us out to pasture, it seems like they're putting a lot of history out to pasture. But
Yeah.
I'd like to.
We've been described as a kind of a cult of youth. And it's so
Mm,
true. If you go into the African American community, for example, certainly the Asian American community, there's not such a significant reaction to deeply forgetful people as though they're gone. Uh,
mhm.
there's much more continuity. This is still grandpa, this is still grandma, they're still part of the family and honored as such. And so I think it's particularly among the Caucasians because we have, I think, hypercognitive values, and we put so much emphasis on productivity and on linear rationality. We forget about being and just slowing down and connecting.
Yeah, it's interesting because that age where I'm watching friends and people that I know retire, and I am not of the mindset where you retire and you do nothing, but I know people who've retired from their well-paying job that they absolutely love to go to work at, 7-Eleven or something, because they have to be busy. They can't just enjoy life and, figure out what it is that they love to do and then live their lives.
Yeah. Well, the great spiritual writer Khalil Gibran said that success in life comes when you blur the line between work and play, when you
Hmm.
find your true calling. And many people do find their true calling, and so they never really work. They just have fun, and they do beautifully. They're never really tired or depleted or burned out, and they're doing what they should be doing. I believe everybody has a calling, and our job is to find it and then to use it to help other people.
If we'd only do that. So I'd like to get back to dignity. Dignity for deeply forgetful people. In your book, you share a story about being near someone, and I can't remember exactly where you were, but it triggered something that happened with me, where someone had deep deep forgetfulness, and they were being yelled at by their
Yes.
caregiver. And I was in Safeway supermarket 4 miles over, and I heard this guy just yell at this woman. So me being nosy, I went and I took a peek, and the poor lady, she must have been about 90. I mean, she's shaking so much she could barely stand. And the male caregiver over her was pointing his finger at her and just screaming. And of course, I injected myself and
Good.
at least got him to stop screaming. But why? Why do these people do this?
You know, they need coaching. Um, there is that story in the book, in the parking lot in front of the Joseph M. Foley Elder Healthcare Center,
Mm-hmm.
where a guy in the driver's seat was just screaming bloody murder at this very wonderful uh, wife of his, who was deeply forgetful and was heading into the clinic. And she just couldn't remember how to open the door. And so instead of simply helping her with that, he had grown impatient and judgmental and completely unforgiving and unloving, and he was just letting her have it. So yeah, I walked over there and I intruded, and he calmed down, and I tried to help him calm down with the right tone of voice, and then I took her in with him there and tried to be a bit of a role model. But people aren't prepared for this. They don't have any training. They don't have any background in really how to interact or communicate with deeply forgetful people. Part of the book is just on how to communicate. You never ask them an open-ended question. What would you like for breakfast? Because they're immediately on the defensive.
Yeah,
They
they
have
have no
to,
clue.
like you were saying earlier, they have to, they have to dig up these words. What you use language to cue them. So would you
Mm-hmm.
like an omelet, or would you like post toasties? Then you'll get a
Mm-hmm.
response. You don't ask,
Mm-hmm.
how are your kids? You say, how's Zach and how's Jill? And then you'll get sometimes incredibly enthusiastic responses, more of an emotional sort, but they'll know what you're talking about. You don't use language to put them on the defensive.
Mm-hmm. It's about making life as easy as possible. So, what role does the brain play within all of this? And where do our memories actually live?
Well, that's a great question, Monique. I'm so glad you
Mhm.
asked that. I want to thank you for that. So this book is unique because there is a seventh chapter, and it is entitled, "Is Grandma Still There?" Question mark. And every grandchild I've ever met has asked me that question over the last 30 years from coast to coast in many
Mhm.
different parts of the world. And I always say, well, of course she's still there. We have no business being so arrogant as to say, okay, she's gone. She's a husk. She's dead. Uh, Forget about it. No. And in fact, if we use so many wonderful methods effectively, personalized music, art, there's an Alzheimer's choir in New York called the Unforgettables, and People who
Mm.
haven't communicated much for months and months and months, suddenly if they're singing a song with their caregiver, the two of them light up together, and believe it or not, they can communicate a bit afterwards. And so there's a stimulation. We can connect with these people, and we should never write them off. And some of them, in fact, have a lot to teach us about kindness and about a life which is more connected and not just rushing from point A to point B. So I always say, and I define hope in the book as being open to surprises, because
Mm.
you just never know on any given day. 90% of caregivers say that they've been absolutely surprised by these moments of lucidity. And we just published a big paper in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences on paradoxical lucidity, on the extent to which people out of the blue will sort of come into themselves and be coherent for a while. It will fade. It will
Mhm.
fade. But the
Mhm.
caregivers are inspired because they realize, you know what? We're not just caring for an empty flask, but we're actually caring for grandma or grandpa. And you ask, what is memory? Well, that I don't think that memory is understood well neuroscientifically. It's really not. But deeper autobiographical memory, the narrative of our lives, I don't think it's necessarily even within the brain. It's just a mystery. And
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes I use the analogy. I have a computer on my desk here, a desktop, and it holds a certain amount of memory. But actually, most of the memory is in the cloud.
Mhm.
And the Buddhists and the Hindus say that there is something called the Akashic memory, that somehow who we are is caught up uh, beyond ourselves in a kind of universal mind. We can't say that's not true. Maybe it is.
Mhm. Well, yeah, we can definitely take a look at that and make up our minds, but it's just I, I don't know, this condition so frustrates me because number one, it seems to run in families. Um, and is that valid or no?
Well,
I'm just going based on families I've
yes,
been around.
yeah, yeah. So, but I want us to be very precise about the running in families thing.
Hmm.
If you happen to have a first degree relative who's diagnosed with probable Alzheimer's,
Hmm.
and that means either a mother or a father or a sibling, you have a little higher probability, instead of say 14% probability of being diagnosed by the time you're age 80, you may have an 18 or a 20% probability, but it's not very hereditary. There's no major genetic factor. I mean, for a very few people, maybe 2 or 3%, who have early onset Alzheimer's, which begins when people get into their 30s and is a very quick course of action. I mean, they'll be dead within 4 or 5 years typically, and they have a lot of behavioral challenges. But those families, they know what they have. You can actually get a genetic test for the presenilin 1 or the presenilin 2 gene. But for 98% of these cases, people get a little squirrely around age 60 or 70 or 80, and it's not terribly familial.
Mm, okay. Why is it in America we make caregivers spend, I don't know, their lives almost in poverty? We don't pay them well. If it's a live-in situation, generally they're not treated very well all the time in the care person's home. Why is it that we not only get rid of, disassociate with the Alzheimer's person or the deeply forgetful person, but also the person taking care of them, especially if it's not a family member?
Oh, it's horrendous just to see the wonderful nursing aides in assisted living centers and nursing homes, or who are working in homes, how much they do for people, how kind they often are, and how little they get paid. I mean, it's strictly minimum wage stuff. And that's a real comment about American culture. I think we, in general, we take these individuals who are helping the most needy among us and who really, in fact, represent ultimate reality because we are vulnerable, we are frail, and we are dependent on one another. We may kid ourselves and say, hey, I'm just totally independent. I'm going to be independent forever. And and I'm not frail. I'm going to keep going for another 20 years. But the bottom line is human nature, we're dependent when we come into this world. When we fall ill, we're dependent. When we have dementia, if we have it in old age, we're very much a culture that denies dependence and vulnerability. And if we had a really just society, we would do much more. We wouldn't allow people, even family members, spouses in particular, to spend down into poverty. They have to spend down so they don't have more than $15,000 to their name. That is ridiculous. Up in Canada, and I've been all through Canada, every province in Canada has a Good Samaritan program, and they pay for assisted living, they pay for nursing homes, they pay for hospice. So you're not put in this situation where you have nothing left. It's terrible.
Yeah, it is. I recently had a client who had to put her husband, I think he's 88, into a facility because she couldn't handle him anymore at home because he was a runner. And when she checked into it, she says, Monique, we were fortunate enough to have a home and a beach home and, have a nice life for ourselves. However, to get adequate care for my husband, I had to sell the beach house because we had too much money in the bank. So she sells the beach house, she puts him in this facility, and she is not at all satisfied with the level of care that he receives. Even in a facility, they seem not to give that loving, that caring that you're talking about.
Yeah. So I agree with your client, by the way. There comes a time when you may not be able to manage a person who's
Mm-hmm.
deeply forgetful because they can have, it varies a lot, but they can have behavioral issues. They can just be very hard to manage physically. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so if a caregiver feels that they've reached a point of exhaustion, they've lived as many 36-hour days as they possibly can, they should not hesitate to rely on professional help. And that means assisted living in a nursing home. Now, a lot of times, the sort of tender, loving, personal side of care is not as obvious in those environments. And so I suggest that caregivers visit. My grandmother died of what was probably Alzheimer's, although at that time they didn't even use the word. It was just senile dementia. And I
Mm-hmm.
would visit, a couple times a week and do assisted oral feeding, just tell her a few stories. It's nice if you can sing with somebody because that actually can bring them out of their silence. If you sing a song that they identify with from early on in their life, they'll sometimes chime in. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
70% of them will. So and they'll even get somatic and rhythmic. So there are things to do, and you just because they've been relocated into a facility doesn't mean that you're abandoning them. It just means that you're getting some help, and you can still be there. Stop by on the way to work or on the way home from work 3 or 4 times a week if you want. Still be there.
Yeah, why not? It's important to the family, and it's also important to the person receiving the care. Now, in your book, you talk about a subject that it's wonderful and frightening at the same time, and that's preempted assisted
Yeah.
suicide. There's certain states in the United States where that can happen, certain states where it cannot. So, talk to us about that. And if the person has forgetfulness, how do they know they want to commit suicide? I mean, they might
Yeah.
think Monday, yes, and Tuesday, no.
So listen, Monique, this morning I got an email from an old friend in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
It says, Dear Stephen, this note is to let you know that my sister, I'll delete the name,
Mm-hmm.
will end her life on Wednesday, the 17th. That's just 2 days from now.
Wow.
She and some of her family are there now, completing the final details under Swiss law. She went to Switzerland. There's a place
Oh,
called.
okay.
I am devastated. All good things to you. Say a prayer, please. And
Mm-hmm.
I do talk about assisted suicide, preemptive assisted suicide, a whole chapter in the book, because there's no way we can deny that. I talk about a guy in San Francisco. You're out in on the San Francisco area.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
guy was a street clown, okay, and he for years and years performed his tricks on the steps of the public library and all of that. And he was diagnosed with probable Alzheimer's, and he began to decline. And he had not much money. He had no family members, so there was no one who could really look over his journey as he became incapacitated and protect him from dying with a tube and every orifice, natural and unnatural, which he certainly did not want.
Mm-hmm.
So he took his money and he bought a plane ticket, and he went to Switzerland, to Dignitas, and was never heard of again. And I talk about that in the book. I actually wrote some articles in medical journals about it. And I said, judge not lest you be judged. I don't support this stuff. I'm much more into providing supportive and loving, caring environments, and for us
Mm-hmm.
to learn how to connect with these individuals. But if someone is, well, they're calling them now live alones. I don't like that language, but if they have no family and they just don't know where they might end up, and they don't want to go through this experience, I'm not going to be the person to judge them. So that's
Mm-hmm.
basically where I leave it. I don't endorse this, but in my Cleveland days, honestly speaking, I spent 20 years at Case Medical School. There were 4 or 5 families that I encountered, and these were, pretty significantly thoughtful people. They did not want to go through this decline, so they had some Seconal from their physician, and they
Mm-hmm.
asked me just in a pastoral way to sort of be there if they had, say, a beach house along Lake Erie.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that a number of times. I didn't support it. I didn't help them, but they wanted me to say a prayer with them. They wanted me to just be there. So the fireplace might be lit, and they'd be there,
Mm-hmm.
adult kids and their spouse, and maybe a few friends. No grandchildren, no kids at all, because that's a very bad legacy to leave for the young, since
Mm-hmm.
it's complicating for their own futures. But I witnessed that, and Bach is playing, and the fire is burning, and everybody's saying goodbye and hugging, and then in comes that milkshake with the Seconal in it, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody swallows that down, and then in 20 minutes or half an hour they're asleep, and it's not a horrendous, hopeless thing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
endorse it. I'm not a proponent of this, and I have to be careful as not to make that clear for everybody. But I'm willing, if this is what someone really insists on doing, like that email I read you a little earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to judge them. Now, unfortunately, you could say, I think in the U.S. we have assisted suicide laws in 9 states,
Mm-hmm.
um, but they're all the same. So, Monique, you've got to be diagnosed by 2 physicians separately as being within, say, 6 to 12 months of dying, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to be capable of pushing the button yourself,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it might be. So it's an assisted suicide. It's not euthanasia. I mean, you have to do the final act, and so that's why these people are still lucid of mind. They have pancreatic cancer. People with ALS in Oregon
Mm-hmm.
go this route because they're still competent, and they can turn off that breathing machine and they can call it quits. But with Alzheimer's or something along those lines, many, many years before you're actually, within 6 months of dying,
Mm-hmm.
Lost your capacity to do anything. And so
Yeah.
you're cut out of that. And I just don't know if that's right. In Canada now, in Quebec, Americans are going to Quebec to have this opportunity. They're going to the Netherlands. They're going to Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. Um, wow. I mean, it's amazing where you have to go to get what you feel is right for you, medicinally in this country. But I want to talk about Alzheimer's and prevention. Earlier, you mentioned that at age of 30, early onset Alzheimer's can set in. Can it be prevented, period? Can it be a mind over matter type thing?
That's tough. The youngest person I've ever known with a clear diagnosis of Alzheimer's was 25 years of age.
Wow, that's awful
Young,
young.
very young. So again, 98%. Basically, the way it breaks down is about 2% of people by age 70 have probable Alzheimer's, and that doubles every 5 years. And so when you get up into the 80s, you're talking about 14, 15, 16%. People used to think, well, okay, you get over that hump of 85 and you're home free. Not true. They now have studies of women, for example, in their late 90s, and 60% of them have probable Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't get simpler as you age. But can you prevent it? Well, for the normal old age onset stuff, yes, because you've got plenty of time. Okay, diet makes a difference. I mean,
Mm.
for example, there's pretty good studies out of Colombia. The Mediterranean diet seems pretty good. That means basically uh, vegetables growing above the earth, not potatoes and roots and things.
Mm-hmm.
So lettuce, typical berries, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries. You can have fish. Fish are good. You want to basic. Cheeses are actually okay. So the Mediterranean diet seems to be slightly preventive. Again, it's not a miracle worker, but also
Mm-hmm.
exercise is important because a lot of what we call Alzheimer's is not just Alzheimer's. So quick definition, dementia can be caused by more than 200 different diseases. 100 years ago, the major cause of dementia was neurosyphilis. They didn't have antibiotics,
Mm.
and people weren't living as old as they are now.
Mm-hmm.
So they had got syphilis and it went to their brains. Now we don't have neurosyphilis around, but
Mm-hmm.
people are living to be a lot older, and age itself is the major predictor of Alzheimer's. But, many things. I mean, people can have chronic traumatic encephalitis. Concussions can cause
Mm-hmm.
dementia. Parkinson's is typically associated with dementia. There are so many conditions, diseases that cause dementia. So dementia is a set of symptoms, and it's not caused by any single disease, but by many different diseases. Alzheimer's probably causes about 50% of dementia in the US today, but it's very much mixed up with other things like small stroke events in the white matter of the brain. These are called vascular dementias.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat carefully, if you get some exercise, it's been said that just walking at a regular pace, a half an hour a day, can be preventive, and I think that's true. I think some of those studies are compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Also, use your mind. I mean, you don't want to just be passive. Have a purpose. There's a study out of Rush Presbyterian Hospital in Chicago that's been duplicated twice now. Older adults who have a strong sense of purpose. Think about this, Monique.
Mm-hmm.
Strong sense of purpose have 1/3 less memory loss in old age.
Mm.
So if you have a purpose, a noble purpose in life, you will be doing things. Your memory will be not entirely, but will be more spared than it will be otherwise. And so a purpose in life can matter. Also, positive emotions. There's 20 years ago, I was actually at a conference out in Berkeley, and again, not too far from you. And that was the first time, these were leading neurologists from all over the US, the first time that they acknowledged publicly that probably stress, protracted stress, is a cause of Alzheimer's, because one of the things that Alzheimer's does is it shrinks a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which lays down memories. And so if you've got those stress hormones there, not only do they clog up your arteries with fatty acids and slow wound healing over a long period of time, but they also hurt your brain. So there's a great organization on Alzheimer's prevention that I was speaking with not long ago, and they think that meditation and mindfulness are important. So whatever you can do spiritually and socially to alleviate stress and anxiety, that can all be very helpful. And also, nature isn't a bad thing, because like when you go to a meditation place, you'll typically hear chimes and the winds and so forth. So, cherish nature and find inner peace.
Okay. Now, say a person, has someone in their home who has come down with the energy of being deeply forgetful, and they can't care for them anymore. They just can't because of, living daily lives. How can one truly assess a place for their loved one to be? It used to be 10 years ago, you go in and you smell the facility. If it doesn't smell like pee, it should be okay, because that means they're taking care of everybody. That's BS. And I mean bullshit on that one, not belief system. So,
Okay.
so how can we truly assess a place that is supposed to take care of those with memory issues?
Hey, listen, you got it right. BS. There's a lot of false advertising out there. Every nursing home that wants to make a buck is going to put out a sign that says we have a special care unit for people with Alzheimer's disease. I would say be skeptical. You want to really go into that facility. You want to insist on making observations in their special care unit, because at some point, what happens is, in a nursing home, a lot of people are kind of mixed together, but then they'll take the people who are more and more deeply forgetful and kind of separate them out. This has been going on for about 25 years. And so in any particular unit, you might have 20 to 25 people who are very deeply forgetful. You want to go in there, you want to spend time. I have a story in the book about Joe Foley, a neurologist friend of mine. We went to a nursing home in Chardon, Ohio, called Heather Hill. And I went into the special care unit, which was a good one. And Joe and I read the biographical sketches on the wall of this fellow's room. You always want to look for that. Do they have a bio sketch so that you can connect caregivers with who this person was and is and their narrative? And so we read this, and this fellow had a couple of sons, and he'd been in business. So we went out into the main room, and I asked the nurse to show us Jim, and she took me over to Jim, and I took him by the arm, and we sat down at a table, and I asked him, Jim, how are your sons? Because we read on the bio sketch that he had two sons. And he actually got very anxious, and I realized right then and there I hadn't spoken correctly. So then I said, hey, how's Luke and how's Zach? And he got very radiant and very energetic. Then he had a white branch that it was just a foot long or so, and he was painted white, and he put it in my hands, and he smiled. And if a smile was electric, the place would have caught on fire. And he said, God is love. And I asked the nurse, what's going on with Jim? Turns out he grew up, he loved his father a lot. And like a lot of these people who are deeply forgetful, the moment we're living in is kind of full of chaos. They can't interpret it very well. The buzzing, the beeping throws them off. So they'll go back in time to when and how they experienced tender, loving care. He loved his father a lot, and his father gave him a chore in the mornings, which was to bring kindling in for the fireplace. So he didn't have
Oh.
much linear rationality. He couldn't proceed from point A to point C. But boy, he had symbolic rationality. He knew that
Mm-hmm.
somehow who he was, his story was wrapped up with that white twig. And then there was a beat up rag doll on the floor. And, it looked like it had been made 80 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
A puppet doll that a little girl would have on her hand. And he actually walked over to that doll and he picked it up. And then he slowly ambulated over to a woman in a chair in the corner who was crying, and he put it on her lap and she stopped crying. And I asked the
Mm-hmm.
nurse, and yeah, that was her doll. So he still had a lot of emotional intelligence going on. He
Mm-hmm.
was maybe more sensitive than a lot of us are on a day-to-day basis. He wasn't running from point A to point B in a frenzy like we all have to do to make ends meet. He was in the moment, and he was sensitive and caring, and it was a beautiful thing. So I say I think I felt I could learn something from Jim. I did learn
Mm-hmm.
something from Jim. He was resilient, and he still had love in his heart.
Yeah, and that's it. Unconditional love, the love in the heart. As I shared with you before the show began, my mom, actually, it's my stepmom, passed away of Alzheimer's. And, we had to place her, which like hurt everybody in the family, but it just couldn't be done in the home. And when it was time for her to make her transition, um, it seemed as if the nursing staff, including hospice, really didn't give a F.
Right.
And I'm talking about not caring. It's beyond not caring. So
Yeah.
talk to us about, when that final time comes for someone
Yeah.
struggling with this and it's time to make the choices of hospice or whatever you're going to make, especially if you're not doing the assisted suicide. What can we do? How can we look out for the loved one?
Well, most older adults have extracted a promise from their family. Don't put me in a nursing home.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right.
Yes,
And
that was the promise I was living up to, but I
I
failed.
got you. Oh yeah, the first right there, and nursing home. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible name for any uh, uh, institution, because it
Hmm.
basically means they took the hospital model and moved it into some cinder block facility and put beds on it for people to lie down and die. I
Hmm.
mean, so assisted living. I mean, there are whole new movements in the design of assisted living programs, and they're really quite impressive in their own right. And they'll typically even have activities where older adults can, for example, set up baskets for a local charity and find meaning in their lives. So, they'll have uh, um, uh, iPods with music to stimulate memory. They'll do a lot of things, and you got to let people live their lives to the fullest so that they can um, flourish to whatever degree they're able to. But
Hmm.
yeah, so you have to be very careful, and you're going to have some caregivers who are wonderful. I mean, some of the greatest people I've ever known in my life are caregivers working underpaid in these kinds of settings. But like everybody in healthcare, they get burned out, um, and they need help. They need to be supported.
Hmm.
They really need themselves to get time away to be treated as human beings with needs, unless they're going to just sort of get depressed and they need our support, and that's part of the problem with our system. We don't have enough individuals, and the ones we have, we sometimes just work them into the ground, and they still, especially with inflation, they can't make ends meet. So this is
Hmm.
a real problem, and I don't have an easy answer, but I just spend a lot of time with caregivers. I mean, I got to tell you that there's a story in there about Joe Foley and me.
Mm,
Joe was the only neurologist who was both the president of the American Neurological Society and the American Academy for Neuroscience. And we spent about 20 years together in Cleveland. And we went to Mount Vernon, Ohio, where they had a geriatric psychiatric hospital. And
mm-hmm,
one wing of it was people with Down syndrome who would hit 45 and 50 years of age. And typically they have signs of dementia, so they're losing capacities.
mm-hmm.
And they can be challenging. So right there in the middle of Ohio, of all places, this is in San Francisco, there was a community of Hindus. They were from India, and
Mm-hmm.
and Joe and I just stood in this unit, and we looked at the love and care that they poured out on these individuals. They never became impatient. They were able to
Mm-hmm.
soothe them. It was a beautiful thing to behold. So Joe and I took a couple of them out to a pizza restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I was going to tell a joke about pizza, but it's too cheesy. No, sorry about that. We
So
took him out
cute.
to we took him out to a pizza restaurant in Gambier, Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
and we asked him, so why are you so caring? I mean, you seem like unlimited in your love. And of course, by the way, for love to be love, it has to be unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
And and they said to us, Namaste, which is the Hindu greeting. And it means, I honor the divine in you as you honor the divine in
Fine
me.
in me.
And
Mm-hmm.
so what they were saying was, look, these folks may be deeply forgetful, but they're still as valuable as anyone else. And they have within them this point of light, this divinity. They're still part of and connected with this universal mind. And if you notice carefully, if you give them an opportunity, sometimes they'll express it completely out of the blue, and you'll feel very happy to be caring for them.
Yeah. Wow, what a great story. Um, it's really important. I feel that if you are the caregiver and you've had too much, you've had enough, to have systems in place beforehand. Like most people can contact their local Alzheimer's association and sign up for respite care or any, other services that they may offer. I know that here in my city in Fremont, we have the Senior Citizens Commission, which I'm chair of,
Ah,
and we give out all kinds of information for not only just for Alzheimer's, but anything across the board for a senior, from getting a new job to, to figuring out how to travel the world, whatever it is. And these services are available, but we have to do some research
mhm.
and ask, not just go to the doctor and the doctor says A, B, or C. You got to make up your own mind. Wow, Stephen, I've really enjoyed speaking with you today. What pearl of wisdom would you like to leave with our audience regarding deeply forgetful people?
Well, I would just warn everybody against stereotypes and humiliation and de-dignification. You know, I got a letter up here over my desk, and he endorsed the book from His Holiness, the
Oh,
Dalai
the
Lama.
Dalai Lama. Hmm.
And, I'd gone, this was in December of 2015, I'd gone over to India, to the Indian Institute for Advanced Studies, to do a program on consciousness and deeply forgetful people. And there were, a couple of hundred leading neurologists and philosophers from India there, and there were some Americans there. And I said, don't ever judge somebody because they forget your name. Don't ever judge somebody because they don't have that sort of linear rationality that allows you to carry out your plans from point A to point B. What's
Hmm.
important is their consciousness, their symbolic rationality. They still, if they have that right symbol in their hands, like Jim did in the nursing home, they still know that that's wrapped up with who they are. So
Hmm.
it's the rationality of who you are, not of what you do, that really matters. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama hangs around Bangalore, and he actually came into the back of that room and he said, what really matters is not linear rationality. All the Western philosophers say if you can't be an agent, an active agent in life, you don't really count so much. He said, what really matters is consciousness. So these people can still appreciate the smell of an apple pie, even if it's, look, I actually go to McDonald's occasionally just to smell the apple pie because it reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen. I know that's just, I'm not
No, but I get
advertising.
it. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I get it.
but that ability to connect with smells, with music, with the colors of autumn leaves, with the sound of the waves breaking on the ocean. I mean, that's all there. And so it's the consciousness is there. And he said there's no reason to think that somebody who is more deeply forgetful than others is of any less value than anybody else.
Anybody else? Yep.
And that's the point of the book. Dignity, hold in grace. That simply means for me, hold them in grace. Hold in grace deeply forgetful people.
Thank you. Appreciate it greatly. Appreciate your time. The audience, I think that I know, I don't think I appreciate your time, and I
Okay.
honor you for being with us. Go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy too. I want everybody to remember that the most important choice that you can make is what you choose to make important. Consider making the masterful choice of providing dignity for deeply forgetful people. Abundant blessings, light and love to all. Agape.